G'day and welcome to the Concrete Connection Project podcast, episode 20. Normally I'm around the streets of Adelaide trying to perform and create on every single street of the Adelaide CBD, raising money and awareness for mental health and mental health charities that are supporting people that are struggling. But today I'm in holiday mode a little bit. I'm down where I grew up in Tasmania, and today I'm very lucky to be speaking to the CEO of the Mental Health Council of Tasmania, Connie Digolis. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes.
Good to have you back in Tassie.
Yes, well, thank you very much. And it's great to be here in your office today too.
Fantastic.
So tell us a little bit about the Mental Health Council of Tasmania.
So we're the peak organisation for community managed mental health in Tassie, but we have a little bit of a unique position here. We don't have a mental health commission in Tassie, so we also work really closely with government and in the policy space, and I guess do what we can to try and influence that reform agenda and ensure that mental health services are where they need to be and are actually what they need to be for people around Tassie, as well as that broader outlook towards population health and what we can be doing to make sure all Tasmanians have better mental health and wellbeing.
And, you know, the sun's out at the moment and, you know, there's a nice vibe around Christmas and things like that. But generally, what is the mental health status of Tasmanians right now? I'm sure I know the spectrum's quite large, and you know, from people with good mental health and then to people that might be struggling. So what sort of trends are you seeing at the moment?
I think we're seeing what we see anywhere around Australia and even the world. I think there's this sense of overwhelm in terms of wars and bushfires and cost of living, and this level of unpredictability and almost a lack of us being able to control our environment and our space in a way that perhaps, 4 or 5 years ago, I think there was greater confidence in I know what the future holds and therefore I can plan for that. And I can influence that. I think that's changed significantly since 2020, and it certainly hasn't changed back. I think that has a massive impact on younger people and on that lack of safety and surety that may have been there that certainly isn't there anymore. So I guess on a broader level, how do we respond to people feeling less confident about the future and their part in it than they used to? And then there's also that question around how do we consider responding in a different way, because we're now talking about mental health impacts across an entire population, not across a particular portion of the population. And what can we do for everyone that has to be different to what we do for the people who actually genuinely do need those mental health supports? Yeah,
that is so true about, I guess I definitely feel that feeling of waking up, and not really knowing what could happen in the world, because it seems like anything could happen, good and bad right now. There is certainly that uncertainty around. Now, there's still quite a stigma around mental health, and there's quite a stigma in Tasmania too around mental health, and I guess people talking and reaching out and using these services that are being connected through the council?
It's a really interesting question. So I think there isn't a stigma in talking about mental health. I think there's less stigma around talking about anxiety, depression, the really prevalent mental illnesses and mental health concerns that many more people actually experience, and in fact any of us do to a certain level through our lives. I think there is certainly still really high levels of stigma around the lower prevalence mental illnesses. So things like schizophrenia, bipolar, border personality disorder, they are the conditions that are much more difficult for people to understand, and for us as a society and community to be able to support and not judge. So I think there's still really high stigma around conditions like that, and that's where we find people not wanting to talk about their own experiences of things like that. I think there are still challenges with where we've seen the decreased stigma, where almost everyone might be wanting to own having some level of mental ill health, and then what their expectations are of how that should be met can also be challenging, because that needs to look like different things for different people, and some of our perceptions might not be right in the sense of what we could be doing ourselves versus when we should be reaching out for professional help.
You said a lot of things in there that I agree with, particularly mentioning schizophrenia. I interviewed a good friend of mine who was the carer of a sister who had schizophrenia, and we talk quite regularly, and she had a lot of friends reach out to her and saying how good the chat was and how insightful it was talking about schizophrenia, because a lot of the time talking about some of these illnesses, the only perceptions of them we have are maybe criminals in a crime drama, or someone that, they're portrayed as having this mental illness which makes them do these things, but not everyone's like that. And so I think more awareness and, to drop those stigmas around those illnesses is very important. And then you said something there as well about mental ill health. I think, well, particularly with people I've been talking to, is that immediately when you hear mental health, people assume that that's a bad thing, but having good mental health is good. But then when it starts to get to the lower end, it becomes mental ill health. And then, do you have anything to say about that, or is that a common thing that you see? It's
something that we debate often, is the language, and I guess one of the phrases that we've been using in here more often has been mental health. Does not mean it's mental health is not simply the absence of mental illness. We all have mental health. It just on a day-to-day basis may look different and have a different shape depending on what's actually happening in our lives. To be talking about mental ill health, I guess, is the gentler way to be saying this is actually something that we all experience. We are all going to have dips, just like some days I feel more physically fit and able, then equally there are days that I'm going to feel more mentally fit and able than others. And I guess it's how we normalise that while not completely minimising or overlooking the value and importance of us actually acknowledging mental illness and how it actually deserves to be supported, and the basic human rights of anybody to be able to access the support and care that they deserve because of a condition that they have.
Yeah, well, this is an education journey for me as well, and I feel like you're very knowledgeable and I'm getting a lot out of this interview, so thanks very much. You talked a little bit about before, saying that the stigma's coming down definitely of people talking about their mental health, and I definitely agree with that. But do you still think there's a struggle for then people being able to receive or even just actively listen to the people? Do you think, when I've struggled with my own mental health and reached out to people, I feel like sometimes that they detract because they don't know how to respond, or they don't know how to listen, or they don't know how to deal with someone that is struggling. Do you think do you see anything like that happening in Tassie?
I think we see it everywhere. I think we see it in workplaces. We even see it in families and in communities. And again, I think it comes back to that age-old picture of how mental illness in the past has been painted to us. And I think it also comes from, I don't want to say fear, but I think more of a lack of confidence in how to respond to somebody. We don't have a magic solution for someone who may be struggling because everybody is completely different. Everyone's brain and mind and history is completely different. Whereas we can say if you've injured your knee or your ankle, there's really obvious immediate things that we can know how to apply in terms of basic first aid, let alone, getting to a doctor, getting treatment, knowing what that recovery should look like. We can't do that with the mind. And that becomes really challenging for any of us to feel confident that the advice or support we can provide is going to be right for somebody, because equally what's going to work for me may not work for you. So it's where we draw that experience and confidence from to be able to say to someone, let me get in your space and help you navigate what's going to be the best things for you moving forward. And rather than, as you say, retreating or drawing back out of fear of getting it wrong or not offering the right thing.
Yeah, because I feel like everyone's, generally across the board, everyone's aware. Yep, I should be talking. But then people are starting talking. Then it's like, how do people listen? I think is maybe the next step, or from what I've learnt anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I wanted to ask you a bit of a personal question, if you don't mind. So, being the CEO of an organisation which is got the mental health of a state on its shoulders, does that put pressure on you to be actively looking after your own mental health? Like, do you feel like there's a bit of pressure there, or doing this job does that for you? I'm just interested to know.
It's another really good question. It rents space out in your head that is really hard to switch off. So it isn't the kind of job that I get to walk away from, because I then go home, and this is something that's become even more obvious over the last 4 or 5 years while we hit 2020 and the pandemic, and we immediately, with our support, certainly in Tassie, immediately started saying people needed to look out for their mental health and needed to be aware of the mental health impacts of the pandemic, of the lockdowns, of everything happening through then. Mental health as a topic has not slowed down since then. So I can't think of the last time I watched the news and it wasn't mentioned. So you automatically switch back on again. You might be watching a TV program. And again, a lot of TV programs, this is part of reducing stigma, is that we normalise it, but it then means I switch back on again. So it's really difficult to switch off. It's really... I try to minimise social media.
Yes.
And part of that is the pace, but also because everyone has an opinion on it. And the number of times that you want to jump in and go, you've actually got that wrong, or the language is wrong, or you're actually spreading mistruths, or you're twisting things out of shape here, and you want to keep correcting it, and you can't do that. So how do I manage my own mental health? On a day-to-day scale, the really obvious things, well, I say they're obvious, but, the walking the dog, the mindfulness, making sure there's lots of exercise, good diet. Sleep is always a challenge for me personally. But trying to do those day-to-day things that help me to unwind and to put everything into perspective, but that feeling of overwhelm in the sense of there is still so much work to do, and that constant reminder that we have a system that isn't working in our favour for the longer term is difficult to balance.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something there, particularly about social media and the mistruths and things. We were just driving as a family back from Port Arthur listening to the Science Hour with Dr. Carl on the radio, and I reckon it was about 50% of questions were I saw on Facebook or I saw on this, and then, does this happen? And they weren't necessarily mental health, but straight away he's like, no, that's false. No, that's false. No, there was... There's so much stuff that's so untrue a lot of the time on social media, and I find myself, I've got to catch myself because sometimes at night, if I'm on there scrolling, it's nearly like waking up with a hangover. Sometimes if you get stuck on there too long, and then it can't be good for you, especially the way that it's made now with short form content. But I mean, I use social media for myself as a musician and an artist, and it's that catch-22 of having to use it and trying to not use it too much as well. And I think probably maybe the council has to use it as well to get their message out there, but then sometimes you get stuck falling into its void sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And there are plenty of times that we receive criticism because, to your point around a message needing to be short and concise, so that can then mean it can be simplified, and there can be a really good reason for us to want to simplify a message down to like one key message, but that then means that you have another group of people who are saying, well, you've got that wrong, because it's not all about well-being, and it's not all about walking on the beach and doing yoga. There are actually a whole range of other things, and you're making it sound like it's really easy, and you're overlooking how important the issues are here. And we're not, because you could probably look 3 posts on, and that's when we are looking at a different topic. But because it's got to be those grabs, then you're constantly in that position of trying to respond to the people who don't like what you've said.
Mm-hmm. And we'll take that, that's right, that first little bit, no, they don't know what they're talking about, but that's... if you don't do it short, sharp and shiny, you're just going to get swiped across anyway. Yep. So, and then people take that first little bit and just like a headline as well, either discovered other universes like we were trying to listen to on the radio the other day. No, that's not true. No one's discovered this, or it's a hard time. And then going to that uncertainty, that overwhelming feeling of uncertainty as well, all I think is maybe amplified a little bit by what we're accustomed to and on our phones now.
Yeah, and we talk about mental health and well-being not because it's easy, but in many ways because we think it's obvious, and it is actually something that applies to absolutely everybody. But the underlying benefit of everyone working towards, valuing and working towards their own better and good mental health and well-being means that for those who actually need to get to the services and supports that they genuinely and authentically need, we've cleared the way for the people who do need that support and those services to be able to get to them. So there is a rhyme and a reason, in that broader sense as to why we believe it's really important to improve mental health and wellbeing across the entire population. And it's not just as a feel-good, cost-saving, initiative.
Yeah. Well, one thing, we were sort of brought together through a high school friend of mine, Nick Sullivan, who reached out when I was lucky enough to win the Mental Health Foundation of Australia's Volunteer of the Year award for doing this project. The one thing that he commented, and he's commented quite a few times, is that improving one's mental health should be celebrated, just like we see people walking around the streets in their active wear and their singlets and their tight pants, that they've been to the gym. They're quite happy to display that I've been working on my physical health, and they're happy to show it to the world despite what their body shape is sometimes. But how can we celebrate? I feel like we're not quite there with someone working on their mental health. I feel like it needs to be as celebrated and put out there maybe as it is with our physical health.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think we've had a massive commercial industry that's been able to support physical health that has elevated it to the degree that it has, that we don't necessarily have with the mental health industry. And part of that is because the skills and the tools and resources actually do often lie within us, and we don't have to pay for them. So there isn't a market that can generate all the activewear and the supplements and the membership and all of those things that can actually create that outward way to recognise and celebrate this is what I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
So again, I guess part of the work that we're trying to do is look at how we can look at that collective achievement. So through our wellbeing campaign, how can we improve social connection? How can we enable people to be actually doing this in groups, in workplaces, and sharing it with each other, so that there's that individual and group celebration and acknowledgement of what they've actually completed and achieved through focusing on their well-being through a series of activities for a given period of time. It's still free, so
Yeah.
there isn't any money in it.
Yeah, well, maybe that's it, yeah. But yeah, it sort of leads nicely to something that I believe the Mental Health Council of Tasmania is doing, and is that the 7-minute... Is it the 7-minute campaign? What's that called? Did I see somewhere?
So we've got a 7-minute challenge.
The 7-minute challenge,
and that's part of our Take a Minute campaign. So the concept of that is that you really only need to take a minute, whether it's a minute a day or a minute a week. It just needs to be a minute to focus on a particular question or a challenge, and in completing that challenge, you've actually made a direct contribution towards your improving your mental well-being. So if you actually take the 7-minute challenge concept was you take a minute a day over a week, and at the end of that week you should feel the benefits of taking those daily challenges. And hopefully by experiencing and understanding the benefits, then you might then think about how you can actually make that more of your regular practice. And we're now expanding that. So there are going to be other challenges, other ways for people to stay engaged and to continue that as a regular practice.
Yeah, it's something I'm definitely going to jump on board, and we'll try and put the links and things if people want to take that 7-minute challenge, because, yeah, sometimes it is putting down those lists of things. When I looked at it, it did say, trying to unlock the things that you love and things that you like doing, because sometimes those things get lost, and I think that sort of goes hand in hand with I guess one of the tools in my tool belt which I try to use is the authenticity of the things that I like, and not being, I guess, a sheep in society and saying, I like certain things when I don't. I like to try actively to say the things that I love, despite it not being perhaps what everyone else likes, and just simple things like music, and being proud of guilty pleasures of enjoying things like maybe Taylor Swift and things like that, when perhaps a bearded man my age shouldn't, and
So it's really it's great that you actually put it that way, because that's exactly how we've developed the campaign, is that it's broad enough so that it can be completely personalised to you and what's valuable and meaningful to you, and that we make sure that we encourage you to be able to access it in a really easy and simple way. So that's where we've gone for a visual prompt. So the idea being, going back towards social media or technology, and we all tend to have that phone in the back of our pocket, and the photos that we store on that, and if we can connect a challenge with you finding an image that represents that, then you can find that fairly quickly. It's something that's really easy to be able to share with people. And then it becomes something that collectively you're starting to learn from other people of, it is Taylor Swift, or, I'm something else. But it's not related to the judgment of you on a person. It's actually they're seeing how that particular thing speaks to your sense of connectedness or safety or reward and gratitude.
And then so the 7-minute challenge as well, I saw that you could do it solo, or you could do it as just a group of mates.
Yeah.
Or businesses or organisations are doing it as well. So how does it work So if you're just going solo, you'll get the challenge, and then I guess at the end you get to reflect on what you've done, but and what you've put in there.
Yep. So it will actually produce that for you. So as the new app comes online, you'll be able to register to do your challenge, and you will then get a prompt for each of completing those challenges, and at the end you'll then get a visual statement, and then if you've actually written down why those particular things speak to you for that challenge, then that will actually generate a wellbeing statement for you at the end,
Wow.
which you can happily stick on the fridge or stick up on your desk space and look at and revisit whenever you'd like to. But the idea being that you've tapped into what's already there. You may not have realised that those particular places, people, activities are things that actually directly contribute to your well-being. But by looking for that image and attaching it to that challenge, you've now made that direct connection in understanding actually that's what that really means for me. Mm-hmm. I'm not just, skiving off from work, to catch up with mates or to go for a bushwalk. It's not just a personal luxury for me or a nice to have. It's actually something that is directly contributing towards me feeling mentally fitter and more well.
And then if you're doing it with a group of mates, and then everyone sort of shares those statements at the end, and then I guess, again, talking about that authenticity, people can see certain things about people that perhaps they didn't know, and I guess it's also bringing that celebration, that we were talking about before of.
Yeah, and going back to your earlier point too of those times of how you respond to someone, if you recognise or they might disclose to you that they don't feel that they're travelling really well, if you've perhaps already, they've been part of your network or your group where you've already shared some of those challenges and those images, then you know more about them than you did before. So you can help them tap into the things that give them that sense of worth and value and grounding. And it can be a way for you to actually support that conversation in a different way than you may have previously, because you know more about them in a different context.
And you might have another tool in the belt, or you might have something then to offer, or, if someone, you might take notice that they aren't feeling quite right. I know they love that bushwalk up the Cascades, or I know now that they love going to the movies, or or you send them a song because now that's
exactly.
And you might have a few more tools in the tool belt.
Yeah, so there's a way to it provides a way to support people who you care about or work with, or both. There's a way to support their mental well-being that you didn't have before, as well as actually supporting your own.
Well, that's great. The 7-minute challenge. Check it out. Now, I won't take up too much of your time. We're here in the office and things are, getting back into a new year and things like that. And but talking about tools for the tool belt, is there anything you could leave us with? Any tips or tricks that that might get someone out of a bit of trouble, or just help us on a day-to-day basis to keep our mental health positive and in a good space?
Be kind to yourself. I think probably we're often told to be kind to others, but I think that can sometimes be at the price of being kind to ourselves. And I think that's sometimes we can inadvertently be our own worst enemies and our own worst critics. And that can even come down to I should be doing better, my life or situation isn't as bad as someone else's, therefore there's no excuse for me not to be doing better. I think we've got to be kind to ourselves and have some faith and trust that if our instinct is that we could be doing better, then we probably can, and that we should just go ahead and grab that and go with it and look after ourselves.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast, and it's great to be down here in Tasmania, and I really appreciate the time.
Oh, anytime.
Oh.
So thank you.
No worries. Thank you.